Since the opinions regarding certain players are always shifting due to their performances, contracts, or other aspects involved, I decided to revisit this topic. Usually, we revisit this in season given that it's naturally a given talking point. However, I thought it'd be interesting to take a look at players who, at the season's commencement, will be deemed overrated. As I alluded to in this video, we'll be taking a look at a handful of players that are held at a higher esteem than they should be for various reasons. And with that, here are the top 5 most overrated players of the 2022 offseason. Similarly to Matt Murray, Jordan Binnington rose through the ranks in the NHL in nearly a blink of an eye. One minute he was playing in the AHL with Providence, and the next he was suiting up for the Stanley Cup Finals. Usually though, with most players that fit in this category, they're in it because they were at one time previously amongst the best in their respective positions. They hit this invisible ceiling, whether it be point totals, save percentage, etc., that garnered them so much attention. And once they come back down closer to mediocrity, well, it tends to be more noted. In Binnington's case, at this present time, he's beginning to resemble a one-hit wonder, remarkably elite in the 2019 playoffs, and was one of the biggest reasons as to why the Blues won their first cup in team history. In all fairness, in the small sample size of games he appeared in last playoffs, the goaltender appeared to be on his game when he wasn't throwing water bottles, that is. Even still, aside from those 6 games in which Binnington manned the crease against Colorado, his overall performance during the season was average at best. While going up against his peers last campaign, Binnington finished 38th in save percentage and 39th in goals against average. Despite this though, if we're going by cap hit alone, he tied for making the 8th most league-wide amongst goalies. Sure, there's Carey Price and Sergei Bobrovsky up there that have underperformed, but in my opinion, there's been so much awareness about them being overrated in the past, it's lost its potency at this point. While this one for some may seem out of left field, I assure you, there's some reasoning to support it. Back when Jack Eichel first entered the league, he came in with quite the credentials. As most of us know, he became just the 2nd freshman in BU history to win the Hobey Baker Award. Therefore, after he was selected 2nd overall, behind Connor McDavid, Eichel had a heap of expectations that were placed on his shoulders in Saberland. But throughout his tenure with Buffalo, Eichel never hit the triple point threshold, or won any sort of award in particular. And sure, there's been circumstances such as injuries, a mediocre team that have been challenging for him, but is he truly star material? Thinking about Connor McDavid, for instance, even before Leon Draisaitl started producing at a similar rate, number 97 was having 100-point-plus seasons. Kirill Kaprizov is a good example of a one-man show. Despite not having any bona fide number 1 guy in the lineup, the forward rose to the occasion while recording 108 points last season. Currently in the middle stages of his 8-year, $80 million contract, Eichel will be making $10 million next campaign. This amount will be more than stars such as Cale Makar and Johnny Gaudreau are set to make. Now, we're not saying that Eichel, at only 25 years of age, can't make his mark in the league, but instead that so far he's fallen short. His most productive season thus far was back during the 2018-19 campaign, in which he recorded 82 points in 77 games played. As far as his goal count is concerned, his most yet within a season has been 36. You might recall that recently we went over the situation regarding Darnell Nurse's contract in the Worst Contracts video. And as far as the defenseman is concerned, his contract is one big factor as to why he's on this list. Even though he did improve last campaign, Nurse has always struggled on the defensive side of the game. If we go back to his contract year, his defensive shortcomings were overshadowed by his point production. As far as the giveaway and takeaway ratio goes, for every takeaway that Nurse had, he produced nearly 4 giveaways in the process. Obviously, he's always contributed in other areas as well, such as blocked shots and hits, but did his 36-point performance really warrant this contract that he has today? Similarly to Seth Jones, Nurse's fresh contract that was technically signed last year is set to kick in officially this upcoming campaign. And upon his earning of $12 million in salary, he'll be making as much as Captain Connor McDavid. Even though, as I mentioned, Nurse was better last season in his own end, his offensive game regressed immensely. Despite getting a plethora of assists with 26, his shooting percentage went down to a 4.4%, which is less than half the 10% it was the season before. We're definitely not saying Nurse is the worst defenseman at all. The number one reason as to why he's here is that he's considered a number one pairing D-man, and has been paid like one, which, in my opinion, doesn't adequately match up with his skill level. Ever since Ben Chiarot signed with Detroit, we haven't covered the subject of how much of an overpayment the contract could turn out to be. And there's definitely a multitude of factors that attributed to the defenseman receiving the 4-year, $19 million contract that he did. First off, let's go back in time a little to last deadline. Shortly prior to the time he was traded to Florida, Chiarot had been the talk of the town per se in the hockey world, and was continuously being talked about in the rumor mill. It turns out, the supply of defensemen that were available last deadline were so low that Chiarot warranted a first-round pick, along with other pieces. So could it be then that the value of owning Chiarot's services went up thereafter? Interestingly, unlike most defensemen that are considered the best that the league has to offer, Chiarot plays a different style of game. According to an article from The Athletic, for example, his game is comparable to that of Jack Johnson's and Dion Phaneuf's, meaning that Chiarot tends to shy away from the offensive side of the game and plays an insanely grisly and physical style instead. Therefore, it's entirely possible that it wasn't just the supply of defensemen that were available that contributed to the overpayment, but also the style of game that Chiarot plays. Even still, while referring back to the article mentioned, Chiarot's market value, paired with his production, is $700,000, but yet next season, he'll bring in $9.25 million in salary. After being selected first overall in 2009, John Tavares over time earned the privilege of being known as the best player that the Isles had to offer. And really, one can definitely surmise that he did carry the team from time to time, as he was a Hart finalist twice during his time with the Islanders. However, even though his contract value and production were pretty much on point and reasonable, that quickly changed when he signed with Toronto. After receiving a lucrative $77 million contract for the first season of his new deal, Tavares was the highest paid player league-wide as far as salary was concerned. Even after his front-load contract began to recede, the captain's performance still didn't match what he was getting paid. His debut season with Toronto has so far been his best, one in which he was able to record 88 points in a full season's play. Last campaign, players who were making over $1 million less in salary, such as Leon Draisaitl and Steven Stamkos, were able to reach the triple point threshold. Now obviously, since he's playing on an offensively saturated team in Toronto, his minutes have decreased slightly. But even when he was the first-line center on Long Island and getting more playing time, he was never able to elevate his game to the level that other stars can.